Look, hi everyone, welcome. Thank you for taking the time to join us today. I'm Magella, a technology consultant for AVEC and your moderator for today. Today, we're going to be busting the 3 myths about automation. We will have a question and answer at the end of our event, so please feel free to send in your messages via the event in the chat or comment on the post in this group. Okay, so joining us today, we have Dennis Grant, Managing Director of AVEC.
Hi, everyone.
Yes. Hello, Dennis.
Thanks, Magella.
We have Yaron Segal, Global Chief Finance Officer at Talent International.
Hi, everyone.
Hi, Yaron. How are you? We have Arne Gething, Lead Consultant at AVEC and Automation Expert. And we have Bivek Baral, who works alongside Yaron in the talent finance team.
Hello, everyone.
Hi, guys.
Hi. So to kick things off, we have Dennis, who is going to give us a market overview. Dennis, I understand that RPA is growing rapidly. Could you give us some quick market insights that you can share with us today?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Magella, and thanks for the time, everyone that's joining us. So if you look at the RPA market, it is the fastest growing software market in the world at the moment. Last year, it grew at about 63%. If you look at the size of the market itself, it's sitting at about 1.2 billion. And the view is that that'll grow to about 16 billion over the next few years. I think a couple of things that we're seeing in the market, which is quite relevant, is one is there's the tremendous shortage of skill in the robotic process automation space. And we believe that these are skills that pretty much everyone needs to learn over time. I think the bottom line, as predicted by Forrester, is workplace automation and AI are here to stay. And I think it's important that everyone kind of gets on the journey. If you look at what the market's demanding from an RPA perspective, it's very much around that citizen developer friendly. So in other words, everyone should be able to do it. You don't need to be a developer to be able to use RPA. And the other key thing is the composable services. So how do we take repeatable services and reuse them over time? I think the bottom line from a market perspective is it's here to stay, but more importantly, RPA is no longer out of reach for everyone. So hopefully today, during the course of today's session, we'll show you how you can get involved in RPA and how it can add huge value to you and your organization. So that's just a brief overview of the market, Magella.
Thanks, Dennis. And it's really exciting to see how it is becoming more and more accessible to businesses. And next we have Arne, who is going to tell us a little bit more about what is RPA. There might be a few people in our audience who are here to learn and learn a bit more about what it is. So over to you, Arne.
Thanks very much, Michelle. I think there's loads of definitions floating around out there, but I think if you just think about RPA as software that looks after those routine or manual tasks that might normally be done by somebody pretty much sitting in front of a PC or laptop. So think about keyboard strokes, mouse clicks, navigating through files. It takes those tasks and we have a look at, and basically we automate those repetitive tasks that could be handled that way. So RPA really does love those high volume, boring type tasks that we don't, and it's really the automation of those. So given a definition where we start actually talking about it's taking over those or doing those type of tasks, you can understand that people sometimes are worried about job security. But our experience is that it's an opportunity for a business and it's for its employees. It's not about replacing humans, it's about actually replacing those tasks and taking those highly repetitive tasks that workers do and basically helping them do their jobs better. Doing that actually makes the worker knowledge become more valuable, and now there's actually time freed up so that they can apply more thinking and time for the benefit of everybody. So where we see human skills should really still be used where you're having a look at anything that needs a higher cognitive ability, where you need to be thinking and flexible around that kind of thing, or apply things like emotional intelligence, where you need adaptability or creativity. And robot skills should really be used where you start following a distinct set of rules, where there's a need for 0 errors, so a need for that exact precision. 24/7 operations. If you're needing to monitor something, processes, etc., or run those things 24/7, you've got something that never gets bored, it never gets tired, it doesn't sleep, and it can run for you through the night. And also speed. Generally, we're seeing that the robots are running those processes quite a lot faster than we are as humans. So what's in it for the business? There's a number of categories where we're kind of seeing a lot of benefits come through. One of those is enhanced customer experience. So an example of this would be where RPA is being used to speed up or help with interactions with customers. So you can use the RPA to actually go and retrieve customer information and make that available through, to example, to some Salesforce, who can then have more information. They can better engage with the customer, and that then drives a customer experience. The bots run automatically, obviously, and they perform those tasks faster and more accurately than humans. So we're seeing that increase in processing efficiency, and that together, with not only that, but also it then ends up freeing up people. So from an increased productivity perspective, you actually have the bots doing the process faster, plus you freed up time now from the people that were doing those processes, and that's feeding all the way through. From an ROI perspective, we'll talk about that in a little bit, but we're seeing payback periods here in a few months, not years. Improved accuracy, we've talked a little bit about, the 24/7 nature of the robots, which is great. And I think employee satisfaction is not something that should be underestimated. It's not fun doing the same process for hours at a time, day after day. And by utilizing this technology, this RPA technology, you no longer need to. So what processes are good candidates for RPA? So candidates that have got a clear set of rules and are predictive. So processes that really have a low exception rate, because if you processes with higher exception rates, you then need to cater for each one of those exceptions. And RPA can do that. It's just the candidates with less exception rates are better candidates. Those with electronic inputs or a way of getting to an electronic input. So these could be PDFs, browsers, spread browsers, get the information, files, etc. And then the high volume process is also great for RPA, especially if they've got that low number of inputs. And you want the processes to be stable. That if you've got a process that's pretty flexible or changing or in flux quite often or changes a lot, you're going to have to continuously go back and adjust that RPA. So you want something that's actually pretty stable and it's not going to need a lot of adjustment. So where are we seeing some examples of where RPA excels? So it's really good at doing a number of things that we don't like doing. Things like opening emails and attachments, reading and writing to databases, fetching the information, working with PDFs and spreadsheets, so maybe pulling information from a PDF and trying to figure out what to do with that, or creating spreadsheets, massaging the information and doing something with it. Taking data and filling in forms and repeatedly making calculations. So and connecting to systems or inputs to fetch data. So whether that's via an API or whether there's some other mechanism or means. And then probably a personal favorite of mine, it's around actually copying information from one system to another. That swivel chair information. Swivel chair integration. Really good at kind of taking those tasks and automating those. And then things like collecting statistics, we mentioned before, running 24/7 monitoring processes, but can also be used to go fetch statistics from social media, etc. So Jella, in summary, I suppose it's software that can it can do those repetitive, mundane tasks and processes that we really don't like doing, and give us some time back in our busy days.
That's fantastic. Thanks so much, Arne. So many different opportunities for driving efficiency there across the processes that we all do very regularly. So this brings us to the next introduction. Yaron is going to be joining us today. Thanks, Yaron, for for joining us as the voice of the sponsor.
Sure.
As mentioned previously, Jargon is the Global Chief Financial Officer for Talent International, which is a global recruitment and workforce solutions company. He is here with us to share his first-hand experience with RPA. So Jargon, what are some of the key business drivers or problems that made you consider an RPA solution in the first place?
Good question, Magella. So, I mean, I guess for us, we operate in a high growth business. And I guess what we've always wanted to try and maintain is that as the business is scaling, how do we keep our cost structure under control or at the same level? So we're continuously looking at ways of, how we can innovate certain processes within our business. And this really, was a good mechanism for us to use. The other area was, we're continuously looking at how we move our finance team up the value curve, to become, more supportive of the business, more business partnering rather than kind of focusing on mundane transactions that obviously need to be done, but are kind of questionable from a value add to the business. So I think those are really, the key drivers for us in looking at an RPA solution.
Okay, great. Thanks, Jargon. So in terms of RPA so far, maybe you could tell us a little bit about your journey that you've been on so far with RPA.
Yes. So look, I mean, I guess for us, in terms of the solution that we've effectively rolled out, our experience has been, the technology. It's a very agile approach. We got results very, very quickly, whereas most implementations take weeks and months, to scope to put the solution in place, and really over a few months do you only start seeing the real changes and the impact coming through. Where from our business, we saw those results coming through, relatively quickly, in comparison to big implementations. As I say, I think the solution was very agile, it was very quick, and ultimately, we've effectively saved time. We regard RPA as complementary to our finance team, so it was never really about replacing people. It was just really about how do we get more value out of the individual and help them with their growth, because as Arne said, some of these processes are quite mundane, and it's not really going to help our finance team grow. So, it allows them to kind of refocus on providing value to the business.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, when you've considered looking at RPA solutions in the past, were there any areas of concern that sort of made you not look at going down that path sooner rather than later, or earlier? Sorry, that stopped you from going down that path earlier.
Yeah, I mean, we initially looked at RPA probably about 2.5 years ago. We found the model very complicated in terms of the licensing structures. We felt that we're going to have to deploy a lot of DevOps resources, and it just really seemed very complicated, and probably more akin to the large banks, large multinational businesses, and we felt that it was just prohibitive from a cost point of view.
Was the licensing a bit complicated too? Couldn't necessarily see the wood for the trees with some of the add-ons, the various models that were in play, that they would present as part of the solution.
Yeah, I mean that is correct. I mean it was very complicating, the licensing matrices, and it really just at that stage we questioned the ROI, whether it was going to be feasible for what we were looking at doing. So really we kind of left that process feeling a little bit deflated and really just the takeaways was this is for large businesses. It's not for our type of business.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I'm on mute. Sorry about that, everyone. So after going down that path, what would be the benefits that you've realised since having the bot in place, from your perspective?
Yeah. Again, I mean, really, what it's done is that it's freed up staff within our business to focus on more analysis, more value add for the business. One of our things as well is that On mentioned is some of our reporting needs to be done, very early in the morning. And the benefit with the bot is that effectively the bot could run at from 5 o'clock in the morning, 6 o'clock in the morning. So then when the staff effectively came into the office, the process was complete. So I think it landed up saving us a lot of time. This was the first project that we embarked on. So we're looking at various other processes across the business where we think the bot will have benefit across our finance team.
Fantastic. That's wonderful. Thank you, Yaron. And now we have Anne, who is going to talk us through, given obviously Yaron's situation, he's going to talk us through RPA and why AVEC's offering was so different, and how one would approach their first RPA engagement.
Thanks very much, Magella. So I think where our solution really stands out is that it tackles some of those big myths and some of the things I think that Yaron was mentioning there. The first myth, I think, is that RPA is only for these big companies with deep pockets. As Yaron mentioned as well, definitely the case in the past. But as we'll show you today, we now believe it's accessible to everybody, and that includes large companies, small companies, medium companies, and actually we even see this is going to be beneficial to individuals having their own personal bot running on their laptop. The second myth is that RPA is complex and that you need developers to do the automation. So the automations we'll show you a little bit later today have been built by me. And although I've got a technical background, I'm not a developer. The third is that you needed to target these really large processes in order to get some sort of return and payback. And because of the high cost of the past, you did. But it meant that a lot of the processes that were primed for automation were out of reach because there just wasn't the business case. The other approach that people generally took was to try and kind of lump a number of processes together, and then try and kind of get that through as a business case. But that really meant that you needed to take a leap of faith and bank on the fact that you were going to kind of get all of these processes together. And it also meant that you still generally had to put down a fair chunk of cash before you could kind of start. And this again is no longer the case. You can definitely target smaller processes, and actually you can even target just pieces or subparts of processes. And sometimes that makes sense. Sometimes it makes sense to kind of keep a section of manual and actually just automate part of the process. So the way I'm going to take you, I'm going to show you this is take you through the real world processes that we've actually automated and show you how we approached RPA, and then I'll show you the automation. Yeah, so let's start with just the approach that we actually take and the business case. So in terms of an approach, we've developed a standard, and we found that this actually works really well for RPA. So first off, we'll engage with the business and identify those candidate processes and the all-important process owners. We then we need to have sessions to actually walk through that process, and those we can do either on site or we can actually do remotely. So through COVID, we used standard Zoom calls to actually record those processes, and then take them and map them. The reason that we map them is just to identify things like the actors, the inputs that we have, and across the applications, which applications we're actually touching. We then examine the process to test it for suitability, and we normally do this together with probably the fourth step there, which is around having a look at the business case. We find a lot of the questions kind of sing together, and after we've done the business case, there's kind of a natural gate there where we go back to the business and we now have something where we've analyzed this business case, we've analyzed the suitability, and we can start talking about whether this process is actually worth doing. Assuming that that's go ahead, we would then plan the automation, implement that's select RPAs, and start doing testing. Another gate kind of sits over there, and this is where we would basically demonstrate and show the process. end to end, and do any fine tuning that we would need to do to get it through. A nice way to come to then test the things is to basically try and do a parallel run. So with the manual process, we'd continue with bot runs kind of next to it, and at the end we can compare and contrast those two solutions and see and make sure we've got the measurements and the monitoring in place, and that we've got the right thing. Once that's been run for a few weeks, then we're happy with the process. Then gate 3 comes, and we basically look to put that into production. So in doing this approach, we find that the first 2 steps are pretty self-evident, and I think people would probably have a handle around those. It's the third and probably very much the 4th step that sometimes people stumble on. It's new technology. Maybe they haven't had experience of it before. So those are pieces where we could definitely help. So to help or assist with that, we've developed an RPA business case template. So in this template, there's a heap of different categories and questions, and we basically just work through those. There's drop-down boxes associated. So as we're answering the different questions that we kind of go through, the model that's sitting behind that template is literally calculating whether or not or how complex this process is, how fit for RPA it actually is, and actually will generate a business case at the end. So the types of questions or types of categories we would cover would be compatibility. So here we look at how fit that process is for RPA. We test things, or we talk about things like how often the tasks are actually performed, where does the information come from, what interfaces are there, and how many environments does the systems touch or process. When we start looking at the detailed business process, we're having a look at whether it's actually feasible to automate this process. And here we start talking about that complex decision making. How many steps there are in completing the process, what time of day does the process run, and is it actually a full process or is it just a component of the process? The value proposition we tackle next, how much time is actually spent on each iteration and how many iterations are there, and how long does it actually take to fix any errors, and what are the expected benefits? We also can here calculate things like payback period, ROI, levels of risk, etc. And at the end, we produce a summary. And that summary is great for submissions to approval committees, etc., so that we can actually get through that gate 1 that we kind of talked about. So, Jella, in a nutshell, that's how we would pretty much approach RPA from an approach perspective and assistance in terms of the business case.
Thanks so much, Arne. So, in your experience, how long would a typical process take to get to business case stage?
Yeah. So I mean, it's again depends on the process, but I think we've got processes typically we do in less than a day in terms of taking it through to a business case, and then depending on how complex the business case is, maybe that's going to take you up to a week. But it's not a lengthy drawn out process, and I really think that the templates that we've built really do assist in terms of driving that business case up pretty quickly.
Okay, fantastic. Thanks, Arne. And look, someone's just popped a question into the chat box. Yes, there will be a recording of this session available afterwards, so you'll be able to get access to that. Feel free to also, on that note, put more questions into the chat or post, and then we'll, hopefully get to them soon in the Q&A. This brings us to the next portion. You mentioned that you were going to share some practical examples. Could you walk us through the business case and solution that was implemented specifically for the talent finance team?
Yeah, absolutely.
Great, thank you.
So the finance team started off with 5 processes that the business had identified, and we recorded those and did the mapping of the processes. So after doing the analysis on those, a few of the processes were actually pretty close in terms of suitability, but one stuck out a little bit in terms of ROI. So that's together with the fact that there was a lot of manual processing and data entry in the process, which obviously means errors can slip in. Meant that we chose a process, the allocate cash to debtors process. It's also a process that needs to run daily, and as Jaren mentioned, it's actually got to complete early in the morning. So being able to actually schedule processes to be able to run out of hours would be an advantage. So having a look at that case, what did the business case actually look like? So the process, or this process, would typically typically take about 2 hours per day. So that's 40 hours per month. If there was any errors or data entered erroneously, it would take a long time to reconcile, actually digging through to try and figure out where that error was, and it increased that 40 hours quite significantly. So even on a small process like this, so we're talking one person, 2 hours a day, the ROI that we calculated was over 260%. And the payback in terms of payback was about 2.5 months. So a bot costs $495 per month. There's no additional licensing fees. There's no developer fees. No developer licensing costs. There's no orchestration licensing costs. So it really is that $495, and there's again no time period either. So additionally, the bot actually only runs for about 30 minutes to complete the full process. Well, it was estimated. So that would basically mean that the base cost, that without increasing that base cost to $485, you actually had 23.5 hours still to run any of the other processes that you wanted to run. So with this tech, you can run process as many as you want. You just can't run more than one at a time. Running more than one at a time would require an additional license. Okay, so the other thing that was quite interesting for us was that by running these bots, being able to run the bots 24/7, meant that we could maximize our license usage. So we could run it out of hours when the users really don't need it. We could also run processes early so they can actually get those outputs early in the morning. So what did the process actually do? So let's have a look. It's a pretty simple process, but I think that you'll find this process in many organizations or something similar. So first of all, finance just download a number of transactions from various bank portals. They open up Dynamics and select the instance. They then select the sales and cash receipts, create a batch file, pull that file in for transactions and prepare for data entry, look up the information in a transaction list and use that to search for the appropriate data, then work through those transactions, entering each one of those line by line. And then from there, once all of those entries have been captured, save those and post them. Okay, so let's jump into the demo. So before I kind of kick this off, just to say that I'm going to take you through this in a video, and the reason that I'm going to do this by a video is that I need to actually slow the process down in stages, because if I just kicked it off and the robot ran, we wouldn't see much. It just kind of flies through some of the initial stuff, and in the other portions, I need to speed it up. You can imagine when it gets to kind of the section where it's just doing the repetitive entries or data entries. I don't think any of us want to sit here for 20 minutes just watching it do the same thing over and over again. So by doing this in a video, I can kind of just move it around a bit. I'm also going to, as we go through the process, just drop into some of the detail, just give you a taste of what we can kind of do with RPA. Again, it's a small things, but it's these things can apply to anything. And the last thing is really, I'd like you to try and ignore the technology or the applications that we're actually using. This is totally applicable to any application, and it will run over marketing, HR, IT, as well as it does over finance. Okay, let's get going. Okay, so this is the transaction file that we actually pull in. So same type of thing as you get from many banks, and as you can imagine, they've got thousands of customers, and they won't hold a bunch of the customer information. So as an example, our Microsoft Dynamics system requires things like data IDs, which we have set up in our internal system. The bank isn't going to hold those. So what happened normally was the reconciliation officer would have a look at these, have a look at the process, or have a look at the transaction, and then from there apply some logic in terms of finding the data. They basically find that data, then go across, enter that into Dynamics, and then from there take the value or the amount that's in there and cut and kind of paste it across. And then to kind of keep doing that through all of those transactions. Okay, so if we move across, this is what I'd like to show you here, I guess, is just delving into some of the things that you can actually do. So this is probably how we actually handle exceptions. What would normally happen here is the transaction file would get dumped into this folder over here. The process runs, and because that file has got a different generally has a different username, different file name. We rename it. So we grab it from here, rename it, massage it a bit, and then dump it into the folder that's just below it. And then just archive that in there, so we've always got a record of it.
So, Han, just a quick question there. If the bot, obviously it's set up to accept certain processes and work with certain criteria, if the bot doesn't recognize something that's coming through, is that where it goes and it registers it as a problem?
Yeah, absolutely. So exactly that. So we're talking there
to be addressed.
Yeah. So this is that's exactly where we're going. So this is how to kind of deal with those exceptions. So exactly as Magella's kind of asking there, if we had this set up, that's great if the file's in here. But what happens if the file's not in there? So this is just give you a little taste of kind of what we do. So we kick off the process. The bot over here in the left-hand corner. There's no file in the file folder. So if you watch my email accounts down in the bottom left-hand corner over here, see a file's just actually appeared. So if we open that, if we go across and actually open that up, we've now got a message that says, "Hi, this is your bot. I can't find the transaction file in the following location. Please can you check it's there and run me again?" So instead of having to kind of sit and watch a process and see what's going on, we've actually got some triggers and some checks. If I now dump the file into that folder, we run the process again. You see it grabs the file, it's moved it across, it's renamed the file to a new name, it's archived the old file, and kind of on we go. So that would just be the first step in the process that we kind of run. First step in the process in the run, and then everything else will kick off. Okay, so that's just some exception handling and just showing you that the bot can quite easily manipulate files and move them kind of all over the place. This is now the full process. So as I said, that's the data, the transaction files need to be entered into our system. For us, it's Dynamics. For you, it could be anything else. So the first thing it does is open up Microsoft Dynamics. So all done automated. In here, it'll clear the user ID and passwords and put in fresh user IDs and passwords, which are held within secure in the bot. Then clicks on the OK button to get through to the next screen. And from here, we've got to select a company, drops down, picks the company, clicks on OK, because that company lines up with the transaction file. So again, dealing with pop-up messages and big pop-up windows, sometimes these windows pop up. So the bot has again been instructed, if the window does pop up, then clear it. We then need to drop into the bottom left-hand corner, reset the default date for the data entry, and this is actually pulling from that transaction file. So it types in the new date, clicks on OK, and these are all steps that reconciliation officer would normally have to do before actually doing the transaction file. Clicks on sales, makes another selection in terms of the menu further to the right, and now we've got to create a batch file. So just taking you back one sec. So this screen over here is where we would normally enter in information. All that's happened is I've just zoomed in on this portion so we can just see it a little bit more clearly. Okay, so in the top right-hand corner, we'll actually clear the date and then create a batch file. We create the batch file with a BOT or bot prefix so that we can actually identify that this process or this batch file has been created by the bot in case we want to audit it later. There's then some more screen selection type information, adding in some dates, doing some selections of cash for one deposit per receipt down the bottom. A pop-up window again that we need to address and work with, no problem for the bot. Puts in the date, and we've now got a batch file that's ready to go. And so at this point, we can actually start doing the data entry. So what would happen is, like I said, is that the transaction file doesn't actually hold the data ID. So what we're going to do is actually do the search. So the bot will actually click on the search button over here, go and put in some information that is useful in terms of actually finding the data, do a search, find the data, and on we go. So here we go. So it's selected on the right-hand side, this drop-down, let's put in some information that we've got a mapping for. It then selects that data, clicks on the cash button, puts in a cash amount, and on we go. So same thing again, we do it all the time. So from the data ID, does some searches using some criteria and some logic that we've put in place. It then selects a record, puts in the amount, and on we go. And we've got this is all test data. So all I've done now is just sped this up a bit, just to show that it kind of does does a few more transactions, and then I've actually just cut it because there's a lot more transactions to go. Okay, so then at the end of that process, it pretty much closes off the closes off the application, so it makes sure that it actually logs out, freeing up that license that we were talking about. But how do we know that it's actually run correctly, and how do we know it's done the correct thing? So what we do is actually have it write to a transaction file as it's going. So all those transactions that pass a set of rules and that are going to get logged, it will log into a log file. And at the same time, anything that it finds that is a problem, it will log into an error file. At the end of the process, again, we don't want to be sitting around watching the process, so it'll actually kick off an email. So it sends an email with a report attached to say this is what we've got, and this is where we ended up. We open that up. It says here's the report file, and within that report file, we can then have a look and see each one of those transactions. So all the transactions down the left, excuse me, these ones that have been written. If you have a look in the very bottom left-hand corner, you'll see a written tab. We can then click across to the errors tab, and we see that in the errors tab, there's a couple of negative amounts. So these would have been account balances or something, or adjustments. The bots would know that you don't want to be posting negative numbers to allocating cash. So it's flagged them here and said and made them available to the reconciliation officer to then actually go and have a look. So it's doing all the hard work and leaving kind of the high cognitive ability type stuff through to the reconciliation officer. Okay, so that's really the Dynamics process, or the demo of the Dynamics. So what did we actually see in terms of value that we realized? So we saw the business case before, but how did it actually turn out? So well, our robot completes the process in around 25 minutes, and that's including some of the weights that we kind of got to do for logging on to certain applications. In the last 2 months, it's posted over 1,500 transactions worth about 56 million. And the ROI is higher than expected as the number of transactions is growing. And the process is designed to handle several exceptions. So as we saw, if the files are not found, but also if a data is not found within our system, it'll flag that and say this data is not actually, we haven't got anything we can match this data with. You need to go and create this data within the application. And utilizing the time saved has actually allowed the finance department to achieve some new highs in their monthly turnarounds. And the quality process is complete by the process owner. The quality process that is completed is by the process owner who's actually reviewing those transactions in Dynamics against the transaction list. And he's showing that the errors are down to 0. So Magella, that's that for the use case for the cash to debtors process.
Thanks so much, Arne. That's such a great overview of the finance process there, and what you did with talent as well. However, what are some of the other business functions or areas that could benefit from the use of this technology in particular?
I think it's pretty much everywhere. You could use this in customer services. You could use it in HR, marketing, IT. Anywhere where those processes exist. Like I said before, it's totally application agnostic. So we can use it pretty much anywhere.
That's great. Thank you, Arne. This brings us now. You met Vivek earlier. He is joining us from the talent finance team and works with Jargon. Vivek, thanks again for your time today. Welcome.
Thank you.
How did you find the implementation to start with?
Well, I mean, when Jargon and Arne came up with this idea about doing a receiving process. So basically, what we normally do every morning is log in, get into our bank, download our statement, and put all the transactions that we received overnight into our financial system, and which was a very manual and repetitive process. And when Arne and Jargon came up with this idea, and I was actually surprised at the beginning and I thought it could not happen. But then when I did the first session with Arne, and Arne sort of explained me how it can be done and how easy it is and how do we find the logic and uniqueness of every transaction and post it to a correct data, I was actually surprised. And even when the implementation started happening and when Arne started developing it, he made the process go very smoothly and accommodate all the issues I had and customize to what what we actually need to be done here at Talent, and even the process of implementation was very smooth and very easy there. Yeah.
Thanks so much, Vivek. So you found the RPA solution, using it on a day-to-day basis, quite easy as a user?
Well, I mean, in a little terms, I would say using bot is as easy as sending an email every day. So giving in our case example, what I normally do in terms of just to explain the easiness of it. So I basically download the bank statement every morning and I send an email to bot, and then bot automatically starts the processing after that and starts doing the receiving and does all the process, does all the hard work, and then it sends me a report at the end saying, okay, this has been done and these are the errors that are there.
That's fantastic. In your experience with that, and the fact that you can get it started sort of before you even start work, and it can work 24/7, have you seen an increase in the amount of transactions that can be completed in any one day?
Yeah, well, like you just said, and Anne mentioned earlier, the bot actually starts early in the morning. So by the time I actually come in, the process is done and it's all ready for me to check and post it already. So which does take a lot of time. It does save a lot of time for me. And in terms of seeing increase in transactions, yes, it does help. Like Anne said, it posts around 1,500 transactions in a month. In a record number of times. So yeah, it does. I have seen increase in amount of transactions, but bots made it really easy to deal with.
That's great. Thanks, Vivek. And sort of lastly, what would you say in terms of the benefits that you've had on a day-to-day in your role? What would be some of those?
Like I mentioned earlier, my role in the first thing in the morning was a manual data entry process of whatever we received in the bank account into our financial system. And since bot took over, that process is been taken off me. So it normally saves me 2 hours standard day if there are no errors or issues in middle. So, and since so much of time has been saved, it has just given me so much time to look into something else, and take up new workload, which I could have never got time previously if it's not for a bot. And it has also helped me providing more time to be helpful for my team and get some amazing financial results, and look into new specific area of my workforce and to improve myself day to day.
That's brilliant, Vivek, and thanks again for sharing your first-hand experience.
Thanks, Mozilla.
Powerful, yeah. Thank you. So that now, how much time have we got going? There is another opportunity to do for Anne to run through a simple build for a demonstration there. So if time permits, Anne, run through that for us, please.
Perfect. Thanks very much, Jalal. I'll do something just quickly. Okay, so this is basically where we kick the bot off and start anything. What we've got is, I'm sure you can see the big sort of macro start there. So all I want to do today is just do some simple things. So just want to open up an application. So to do that, I would go and find a command that basically says it's an open window. Minimize this a little bit, see it a bit better. What we do then is just start and actually connect the start button across to the run button. Then here, we need to open up the path. So where does that file actually exist? I just grabbed some here. So these are just the paths that I've got kind of sitting in here, so we don't have to go and try and find them. But all we're going to do here is open up Firefox. So we start, save that, we click on run, and we have the application actually open. Yeah, so let's say that we wanted to then actually type some information in there. Go back to the commands, which would be a keyboard command. So we type in some keyboard text. Again, we just drag it across. We connect that up In here, we just add the text that we actually want to add. So product. I'm going to just actually put a delay on that so we can actually see what's going on. 7 seconds. Save that. Run it again. So we have the application open up. The text comes in. Okay, so that's great. It's typed it in, but we haven't actually managed to do the search. So we need to hit an enter at the end of that. So again, we go through. It's also a keyboard command. And we're going to enter a keyboard sequence. It's across a little bit for you. Again, all we're doing is we're connecting the run-up. Underneath here, it's what keyword sequence do we want to enter. All we want to do is just hit an enter button. So, click the enter. So again, put a delay in so we can just see if it's going to happen. Save that. Close that one. And run it again. Cool. Okay, so there it's put the text in, hit enter, and we've now got a search page. So if we're then to actually just try and change out, let's just change this application out. Let's change that application across to Notepad. And it's doing the same thing just with Notepad. Okay, so there we have the same thing. So just a quick demo in terms of what the build kind of looks like, what the process build looks like, and just showing that actually the different applications you can use. So one we're using Firefox, the other one we're using Notepad, doesn't make any difference at all. So Magella, that's just really a simple demo. It's all drag and drop. There's no code, and it's ready to go on day one.
Thank you so much for running us through that, Arne. A quick question that I thought would be good to raise here is, someone has asked, where does the software run from? Cloud server or local computer?
So it can do both. It can actually run on your laptop. It can run on a VM. It can run in the cloud. Run on a standalone desktop. So pretty much anything in it, pretty much anywhere. Mm-hmm. And that's Linux platforms, Windows platforms, Mac, PC.
Mm-hmm. There's been some wonderful questions that have been coming through, but just due to time, we will get to the Q&A now, but any that we don't address here, we will definitely be covering off and getting back to you at the end. So that now leads us to the Q&A. We have a few questions that were sent in prior to the event. We'll now address these. The first of these is, my organisation has already invested in UiPath. Why would we consider changing, and how does this stack up? Dennis, that might be a question for you.
Yeah, I mean, great question. And we certainly see the benefit of the big three, UiPath, Automation Anywhere, and Blue Prism. But they are akin to certain processes and have a certain profile from a costing perspective. So what we're finding more and more in some of the big commercial banks internationally is that it's a complementary service. So some of the more elaborate, more complicated processes go through the high end of town applications, and some of the low level processes go through something like a Roboteur. So if you look just from a license cost perspective, I mean, you're in for $495 per month for a Roboteur license, and that's it. There's no orchestration licenses, there's no add-on licenses. That's pretty much it. Now, you can imagine certain processes are out of reach for those high-end-of-town tools, and this really just opens up, processes that may otherwise, be out of reach, as well as organizations that might be otherwise out of reach, to be able to leverage and actually benefit from robotic process automation. So we see it very much as complementary and very much as enabling the right process or the right technology for the right process at the right time, and obviously at the right price point. So Like I said, some of the big banks are doing some of their low-hanging fruit processes using Roboteur, and certainly the other more elaborate, more robust processes through, the high end of town UiPath, Automation Anywhere, and Blue Prism.
Fantastic, Dennis. That's great. Next question that we have is that we've received pricing RPA only to find out that there were a number of hidden costs for bots, unassisted bots, orchestrators, etc. What is the real cost of this solution, Dennis?
So like I've just said, and I think that's the thing. If anyone's been in the robotic process automation space at the moment, trying to see the wood through the trees is quite tricky. When you're looking at assisted versus unassisted versus developer licenses versus orchestration to run bots at any given time, there are lots of costs. We've really tried to keep it as simple as possible. Like I said, it's $495 per month per bot, and there's no other costs associated to it from a licensing perspective. So
very accessible.
Yeah, 100%.
Thank you so much, Dennis. So in terms of the end-to-end process, this might be a bit of an ARN question. How long would it take to automate from business case right through to having that bot there ready to use generally as a general guide?
Yeah, thanks, Magella. I think it depends, as I'm sure everybody can imagine, it'll depend on the complexity of the process, but it can take as little as a few days. If the process is well understood, if we can get through the mappings and the understanding of the process pretty quickly, the business case and the suitability checks are quick because of the templates that we've built, and then from there we can dive kind of straight in terms of doing the process automation. So I would say it's anything from a few days to a few weeks. We've got a standard engagement model. You've obviously seen the approach we took you through a little bit earlier. We have a standard engagement model where we have all of these things planned and mapped out. And that obviously includes the business case build, the process preparation in terms of what we're actually going to automate, the configuration, and then all the way through to actually the benefits tracking through an automation center of excellence if required.
That's great. Thanks, Arn. So that covers off all the questions that we've had sent in prior. So we actually have a little bit of time to run through some of the ones that have come through in the chat. One that's just come through looks quite relevant, and someone's asked, is the cost of $495 per bot, for the system regardless of the number of bots created?
No, so it's per bot, and like Arn said earlier, a bot can run a single process at any given time, and you can run as many processes as you like over a 24-hour period, and that constitutes a bot. Where we have people using multiple bots, it's generally for processes that they want to run in parallel, and to give more power to those bots to run more over a shorter period of time. And we've got clients that have anything from one bot all the way through to 50-odd bots, depending on what they're wanting to do around that. But the pricing is per bot, and a bot is essentially 24 hours over which you can run processes. That's simplistically how it works.
Okay, thank you, Dennis. Another question. As part of the Office 365, we have access to Microsoft Power Platform, and more specifically to Microsoft Automate. How is this different in helping us enable automation?
So maybe I'll comment, and then Arn can comment from a technical perspective. So, I mean, it is reasonably similar. Microsoft will tell you can get it for $15 a month. I'll challenge you to say that it's a lot more than that when you look at all the hidden costs. In fact, a lot more than what we've got. Microsoft, you also are quite constrained around what you can do, in terms of using Microsoft itself and Microsoft products. This is platform and tool agnostic and can run any number of legacy applications. It's not dependent on being part of the Microsoft stack and that. But if you look at what's happening in the robotic process automation space, Microsoft had a big play into that space. SAP are going into that space. it kind of really all translates to that rapid growth that's happening. So there are a number of new players in the space, and Microsoft Power Automate is certainly one of those competitors. I don't know if you want to add anything further on that.
Yeah, I think thanks, Dennis. I think the fact that we've got this technology that's really is truly drag and drop. There's never an expectation in terms of coding or doing anything else. There's quite a few other players that claim to do the same type of thing, but then actually when you start getting into it, there's coding required. There's coding required, and it's a necessary part of the technology, of their technology. I also think as Dennis mentioned, the price points are quite different. Here, there's no lock-in in terms of actually using this process. It's not a you sign up for 12 months. You can use this and not use it as much as you want. And like he also said, you can run heaps and heaps of processes. As many processes as you want throughout the day, as long as they don't kind of run concurrently. But at the same time, you can scale this. You can really, really scale it. We're going to actually take processes as an example and split them, and then actually run them across multiple bots if that's required to actually run things even faster. So you have this really, really great flexibility. This really good, great product that can work across kind of anything. It comes in at a price where you can actually test the waters and check whether it's actually something that's actually fit for you with very little risk. And at the end of the day, it's at a great price.
Thank you, Arne. Another one that's come through, how's the accuracy monitored and measured?
Okay, so one I'll probably grab if I can. Within that bot orchestration or that bot launch page that I kind of showed, there's actually there's an audit tab on the left-hand side. And within that, as it steps through each one of the processes, it's actually recording what it's doing in terms of inputs and outputs. So you can actually see at each step exactly what information has been passed across to the next step. So when you want to break down into the real detail from a process perspective and see exactly what is being done where, you can track it and trace it there. From the process that we built, the way we did it is that as each line of the transaction file is actually entered into Dynamics, it writes across into that's the log file as well that we showed you a little bit earlier. So that means that actually if the transaction was to break somehow or something kind of went wrong, we still have a record of exactly how much information is actually, or the information that's actually been written at the time the process stopped. So that would then tie up back into Dynamics. And there's a simple test that we kind of do at the end. There's a tally, an amount that's actually been posted on the one, and Dynamics, as soon as you click on that same batch file, will give you a total. So you can compare and contrast in terms of the numbers that are there. But we haven't yet had an occurrence where actually there's been incorrect information posted. It's literally churning through and taking information and posting that correctly. It's following those sets of rules. There is no deviation from what it does. It doesn't know how to do that. It just follows the process that we've
And I think to add on to that, I mean, Vivek is human, and if he does this all the time, you do get finger trouble. You transpose numbers and that. And what Arne hasn't told you about is although it takes 2 hours per day, if a mistakes happen during the process, it often takes quite a long time to actually work out where the mistake happened and to reconcile it. So, those errors in terms of finger trouble, human error is avoided. And like Arne said, so far the process has been running for 2 and a bit months, and we've had no bot error, and we don't anticipate any bot error because it's following a process, and the bot's going to be better at a human than following a process. And, that's the benefit of robotic process automation.
Thank you so much, Dennis. And we have literally a minute to go. So a very, very quick one to finish up on. How did you manage to get, I'll maybe ask this one. How can we make sure the RPA do not undermine the API integration position?
So I think it's it's a different type of technology. I think that you would potentially use this technology for lightweight type integrations or integrations into systems with legacy type systems where no API, or where the API is either very difficult, very expensive to build, or in some instances isn't actually available. So you could use this type of technology. I don't, for a long-term integration between products, I still think that APIs would probably be the way to go. I think this is a complementary and could be used as an in-between type step, or could be used to actually test feasibility of things like integration. But if it was going to be a long-term integration between two systems that are readily and cost-effectively building APIs, you would still want to do the API that way.
Yeah, and maybe if I could just comment, I mean, we're providing a cost-effective alternative to the high end of town. Second thing, and most importantly, we're business-led. So rather than IT-led, we're business-led. We really want this to be a business enabler rather than an IT enabler. If IT are doing it, chances are that there's better ways of doing it through APIs and stuff like that, and more consistent ways. But it's business-led. And then finally, opening up processes that otherwise would have been untouched because of a lack of an ROI. We start to make those and organizations that previously couldn't touch RPA that much more accessible and available to them, to consider.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Arne and Dennis. And that brings us to the end today. And I'd like to say thank you all for attending. We hope you've enjoyed the discussion. And of course, in the coming days, we'll be sending out an email with the full webinar and links to the video and answers to any questions that we couldn't get to today. But thanks again for joining.
Magella, just before we do jump off, we are offering the first 5 applicants a free process assessment and business case creation around their processes. So if you're interested in something like that, please just shoot us a line, and we're happy to work through that free assessment of your business case for you. And we'll open that up to the first 5 applicants.
Wonderful.
Awesome.
Great offer there. Thanks so much, Dennis.
Thanks, Magella.
Thanks, Magella.
Pleasure, Arne. See you, everyone.